Hello and welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful. I am back in the studio today after a couple of days of playing with creating some of my grungy papers. I thought I'd better do a video and do a flip through of the two journals that I was working on in the last video and show you how they've turned out. I wanted to do some experiments with creating some new papers because I found that in working with the previous batches that I have done, I needed to tweak a few things to try to make my papers less brittle. And so I have, I think, come up with a few tips that are working so far. So I'm going to do a tutorial after I do this flip through. This is kind of a two-part video of how I've created my first couple of batches of new grunge papers and the things that I have learned that I think will improve them to use them as folios in journals. So I'm going to start with the first one. If you did not watch the previous video, I will put a link down below in the description, along with, I think, the playlist I'll include of the last journal project that I did, which was Melane's journal. That's where I first used my grunge papers in an actual journal as folios to try them out, and that's kind of what led to these two. So you may have been following along or missed something, and I'm going to show you also how I repaired some of the folios that were more fragile, and one of those ideas is also in Melane's journal playlist. I'm also going to include the playlist for all of my grungy papers, coffee stain papers and bubble paper and all of that, because over the years I have done several different techniques and tried out some other things, and so I'm kind of always just trying to experiment, maybe not doing exactly what I did before, so those might interest you as well. So I'm going to include that playlist, and then as usual, I will also include in the description any tools, materials, products, that kind of thing that I use that you may not be aware of. So you'll find all of that down there. If I forget anything, please let me know in the comments and I'll try to include it. So in the last video I did, I had already put the book block of this one together using a Kettle Stitch, and it was a spineless journal. So I did a second one on camera, the whole thing start to finish, and that was this one. It did have a spine, but it may not as well have, because the spine served no function other than decorative. I liked it, and so I left it on. So I'll show you that one second. So the first one that I had done was using a vintage book cover, and when I sewed this Kettle Stitch together, after I did that, I glued some scrim. It's really just a gauzy fabric. I use it quite a bit, and I'll put a link down below for some of that. I just glued that to the entire spine. This one I did a little bit differently, so it shows you in that video. So I just glued that on, and that fabric then glued to the cover to hold the whole thing, to hold the cover onto the book block. And then I also took the first page from the first folio and glued that down to the cover so that it was nice and sturdy. I did all of that on camera so that you were able to see how I put it together. But I wanted to point that out because the other thing that I did after the fact, and I did not do this on camera, I went back and I reinforced any seams that I thought were going to be a little fragile, or that just maybe had a bigger gap than I liked, that sort of thing, just to make the journal look a little bit more finished. And I'm going to share with you in this video what I used to do those repairs, because they're just some different ideas that maybe you have tried in the past, and they also kind of go along with the paper demo that I'm going to do. So the first one that I did, I try to kind of blend whatever repair, blend it in, or at least make it look cohesive to the page that it's on. So this first one I did with the reinforced tracing paper that I had made. This is a paper that I made in Melane's video, in Melane's journal, and used to actually, instead of this situation, I actually had this, the first folio, and glued that down. So if you saw that, then you saw how I made this paper. I used tea stained or coffee stained, doesn't matter, tracing paper. You could use tracing paper that hasn't been tea or coffee stained, but that's just what I used. And then some cheesecloth just regular kitchen cheesecloth. And I adhered it together because, you know, that's such an open weave. You can't really just, or I didn't want to just glue the whole thing down. So I used this spray and bond fusible adhesive. It's permanent bond. It's for fabric and crafts. So I just sprayed this onto my tracing paper because I didn't want something too wet like glue, because if you've ever worked with tracing paper, as soon as you get it wet with anything, it kind of crinkles up. And so I needed something that would hold it but not wet it so much that it changed the texture of my paper. So I used this, sprayed it on, laid the fabric out, and it doesn't really stick it down then. It sticks it down enough for it to stay together, but then you heat it with your iron and that will make the bond permanent. So I heated it with my iron, and then now I have this kind of fabric paper that I love because it has a nice texture and it makes tracing paper sturdy. So I just cut strips of that, and then in this one I used my glue stick, and I use Yoo-Hoo. You can use any brand that you like, but I used the Yoo-Hoo glue stick, and then I did it on the fabric side. You could do it on either side, and then just put that down. And so that made a nice sturdy seam for that first page, which I needed to do because it's really part of the construction of the journal. And then I did this inside one. I'll kind of just flip through here and then I'll tell you about what I did because I use that quite a bit. So doing the kettle stitch, if you did not watch the previous video, you're taking folios and just stacking them right on top of each other instead of inside each other for a signature. So a folio is just a piece of paper folded in half. And then a signature is when you stack multiple folios together and then stitch them into a book. Each of those groupings is a signature. So in this case, for a kettle stitch, it's nice to just stack your folios one on top of the other and you stitch them together, and that way when you're working on your journal, they will all lay flat. And so it's just kind of a nice thing. Now, what happens is you do get where this is a folio, you can tell because the papers look the same. You know, it was one piece of paper. On the inside of the folio, you get your threads where you stitch it together. So on every other one, you have threads. And then in between those two folios, you kind of have a gap because you're stitching the book block together, holding it, you know, if you watched the last video. And you can't get it so tight or you'll tear your paper. So you end up with this little gap. So sometimes you can leave it open and it's fine and it's sturdy. And in this case, I think I'm just going to leave it. I don't have a problem with it. But sometimes you want it to, maybe you have a fragile spine here and you want to repair that. So I've done that on some. So again, this is the center of a folio where you see the stitching. And then this is between two, and I did not repair that. So I'm just gonna kind of flip through. So all of these papers were ones that I did quite a while ago, but I'm gonna show you the technique maybe with some different products, a lot of the same ones, but where you see a lot of color. Those were done with maybe different spices, like turmeric has a color to it. Saffron is where you get the yellow. I did also use some dyes and things, but most of this, I tried to use all natural items in the kitchen just to see what I would have. So these little lines that you see were saffron threads that I sprinkled around. So these were all some experiments I did. And like I said, I do have the video for these down below, but I'm going to show you kind of my second version of a similar thing. This repair was done, and I did have somebody ask me this question. So some of the folios, I could tell before I even used them that they were going to be fragile. So I repaired them ahead of time. And so the question in the comments for this previous video was, can I repair those after or before you put the book together? Of course you can do that. So if it's obvious, I would do it then. Keeping in mind that when you stack your folios, your repair now is only on one side and not on the other side. So if you want it to, if you don't mind that, you can do it beforehand or use the same material in all of your repairs, but then you'll still end up with this gap that you may want to cover. So you can do it either way. And I don't know that I have a preference. I did some both ways. I think for the ones that have the gap, it was kind of nice to wait. You know, these would have been done then on the outside of the folio. So maybe if you're going to do a repair ahead of time, you might say, if I'm going to do the repair ahead of time, I'm only going to do it on the inside, because that way I know it's going to look even on my page. And if I need to do repair after the fact, then it's going to be covering up the seam. So maybe like I said, I do my repairs on the inside beforehand, and then I can repair them afterwards, and I would have it looking nice here. So it's just, whatever you choose to do, but I want to show you I did it both ways. So just some of this color are done with inks. The blues, that you see in the greens is because the blue mixed with another product that I'll tell you about here. So I do like, one of the reasons that I like to do all these grungy papers is I like that they look so natural, like something nature would have created with stone or rock, that kind of thing. The beachy sort of colors and sand and water and sky. And so that's kind of the color palettes you'll see me use mostly. But I really like how the way that I do these, you never know what you're going to get. And some of them end up with lots of texture. And I'm going to show you how I did that. Oh, I did not mention that previous repair that I showed, this one. I've done this in other videos, so if you follow me all the time, then you've seen this. But this was when I did my faux tea bag, used tea bag. I save used tea bags to repair old book page, and I needed more than the tea bags I had. So in several videos, a few months ago, I did a video on experimenting and figuring out what to use for creating faux tea bag. And so I had done that, and I like to use that to do repairs because, again, it's in all those natural colors. This one here you can hardly see, and I think that one was done, it's really sheer, but you can kind of see it, was done with artist hinge tape. And I'll put a link down below for that. It's the tape that you would use when you're mounting your artwork. So I used some of that. Again, this one was done on the inside beforehand because you can see the stitching still, but that way your repair goes on both sides. And so this one was done again with my faux tea bag. But just a nice variety of papers. And it got me excited to, I wanted to create these journals and use them so that I could make more paper. And that's kind of a lot of the fun. This one here, if you can see, I have actually two different repairs that were done on the outside. This one was with the artist hinge tape. And this side is with, if I have a scrap of that left, this one was done with some tracing paper that I had made using my bubble technique. And so, it's thin. You can see that it does get that crinkly thing when you get it wet. But I just used glue stick and then it smooths out nice. But it just had that natural stone look too. So I've used some of that for repairs. And then let's see. That's the other side of that. Each of these journals has 25 folios. So that would give you 50 pages, but then I glued those first two down. I really like that one. Hopefully I can get this technique, except for the saffron threads. I don't have any today, but I can at least kind of show you maybe some of this get this other technique to happen. It gives you that kind of fossil look in stone. And I like the kind of marbly look. And that's it for the first one. And see, I did not, oh no, there's one more page. That one looks like, even though it's two different folios, they looked very similar. When I do, one of the ways that I do this and let them dry, you're stacking all your papers. So if you were to keep them in that order, it would be really easy to put your journal together because your bottom side of one and your top side of the other have been put together at one time. So when you fold those in half as folios, they would look cohesive as they go along. And I'll kind of explain that when I do the demo. But I like to, when I've put them together, kind of try to make them flow. Sometimes you get it works out really well. And sometimes, you know, you can tell the difference. But I just try to, as I put two different ones together, like this is two different ones, you can kind of make them look cohesive. So then this is the end. And again, this is another repair. And I'll show you how I made these today. This is with tea bag paper, artist tea bag paper. So I'll show you that, because that's kind of an idea that I came up with as I was working on this last batch of papers. And I'm going to use at least two other materials that I will have then on hand to use for repair like that. And they're repairs, but then I also think they add part to the designs. So I really don't mind doing that. Although I've added a couple of techniques into making my paper that may avoid the need for repair. At least that's the goal. Okay, so this is the second one. This was also done with an old book. This one actually was from 1881. And it had a spine, so I left it because I liked how it looked kind of tattered. But then I did end up going ahead. It was loose. You can see that this cheesecloth look that you see, that was actually part of the original construction of the book. And that was still there. So I glued these strips that were falling apart down just so it would kind of last longer. So I'll just kind of go through this one. Again, very similar papers. When I put this one together, if you didn't watch the last video, instead of covering the whole thing with cheesecloth like I did on the previous one, I just made some tabs out of some cotton fabric. I don't know if you can kind of see through there, but I just used some 3 strips of cotton fabric, and then those tabs were glued down to this cover. And then that first page of the folio was also glued down. So that is what's holding my cover on. This part of the spine is actually not attached in any way. It's just there because it's still attached to the cover. So it's kind of a floating spine sort of thing still. And then again, I used the same tracing paper with the cheesecloth on it to do the repair here. And again, that was done obviously after the fact. This one I had a pretty big gap, so I used the tea bag paper that I made yesterday and used that and put it together. This one is obviously the center, and this one you can kind of see how big that gap can be. But I don't really, I don't always mind them. I can put something here, or it could just be part of when this page gets journaled. Someone may put collage paper or whatever there. So just going through this one. This one has a lot of texture, which I'm going to explain how that happens when I do my demo, because I've got some examples of that. And I'm going to kind of tell you what I tried that I didn't like how it worked as well. That way you'll know that I tried it and not waste your time trying it if you don't like how it looks. And some of these you can't really see, and I'll show in some of the new papers that I did that I'll show you. I use a metallic, and so you also get that really sparkly thing that to me looks like, when the sand is on the beach and the tide goes back out and you see some sparkle where it just kind of hung back and it pulls together. So I've gotten some papers that kind of have that effect. This to me looks really stormy and nice. This is, again, the tea bag paper that I use for repair. And same thing here. I had done some repairs previously. I had put, I don't know if you can see through that. I had used some dictionary page to repair the exterior of this one. So that meant I had dictionary page on one side, but nothing on the other. And I kind of needed to repair it just to cover that gap for me. I just wanted it to look better, and I should have saved one to do on camera, because then you could see the difference. I mean, you see it here where I have a gap that I didn't, fill. It kind of just makes it look a little more professional and finished, I think, and you don't have that gap. So I created these papers. This is, again, tea bag paper to make it kind of look like one of my papers, so it really kind of blended in. So I kind of did my technique that I'm going to show you and created some of those. This, again, is that kind of fossil-looking technique. This, to me, is just like marble, kind of a marble look. They're just a lot of fun because you'll kind of learn the techniques to create certain things, but you never know how they're going to turn out. That's really pretty too. I love this one. Just all of the pattern and color that you can see in that one. I need to do these on camera more just so that I can watch the back to see how I achieved that look. I love this one too. These have a lot of texture that I'm excited to show you how I get that. Now, you see a lot of white in this one, and I'm just going to point that out so that when I do the demo, I'm going to remind you of that. So pay attention that how white that is. These are some of my favorites, and I'm hoping I can get this on camera so that you can see how textural this is, and you can actually feel some of this. And it's different. This feels different than up here. So these are some of my favorites. We're going to see if we can get some of that today too. Again, a lot of white there. I just love it. And that just it looks like water, you know, to me. All those nice sea glass beachy colors. And this one has a big gap. I did a repair beforehand on one side. I haven't done anything. I may, if I end up coming up with a nice, something that looks really good there, then I could always do that later. But some of them I don't mind. If the papers aren't fragile, then they're fine. Just a fun, you know, different bunch of things. And that's it. And I used, again, the same one with the cheesecloth and tracing paper on that side. So that's it, journal number 2. So I really like how these turned out. I mean, I think they would just be so fun to work with. I just like even looking through them. The papers are just so unique. So that's it. I'm going to have 2. I don't know. I'm going to keep making more so that I can decide which ones end up in my Etsy shop, because I may want to hang on to one just to remember what I did. So to do the papers, you're going to need a few things. I have a big mess up here, and I'll probably have to scooch out maybe a little bit. You're going to need a few things, and you're going to want a cookie tray. So I'm going to use the cookie tray. Just something, because you're going to be introducing a lot of liquid. Now, I have a little glare here. It's from my lighting, so I hope that doesn't bother you too much. I can move it, but it's nice to have all this light shining here. This is something you're going to need for after they're dry, possibly. So just something with a sponge. We're going to kind of sand with that, but that's for after. So something that's going to hold liquid. And then I start with, as far as the paper that you want to use, obviously you can do anything you want. I'm going to just today use some 28-pound printer paper, because that's what I have. It's a nice weight for the pages. I do like a little heavier than this, but I've used all of my Hammer Mill 32-pound paper. I will put a link down below for that, because that is probably one of my favorite weight. I guess a lot of these papers are done with that weight, but I also have used a lot of this. So the ones that I'm going to show you today are with 28-pound printer paper and 32-pound Hammer Mill paper. You can use other things, mixed media paper. I wouldn't get too heavy. I've done watercolor paper and things like that, but it's just depending on what you want to use it for after. If you want to use it for like a cover, this I believe is with my bubble techniques. And this was done probably with mixed media paper. So it's heavier like cardstock. But if you're wanting to make a cover for a book, you know, then do something heavier like that. But if you're doing it for the pages inside, this is also that heavier paper. This one, again, is also a heavier paper. But for pockets, like if you watched Melane's journal, I used this for a pocket. So depending on what you want to use your pages for is kind of the weight of the paper. You could use even cardstock, really anything you want. I'm going to actually try a piece of fabric today because I have not done that yet. And I'm thinking that that would be good for doing the repairs, is to do some fabric. And if you've watched me in the past, I like to often use this first folio, have this first folio, either the whole thing be fabric or half fabric, and then the fabric comes over and you've hinged another, like a tracing paper or vellum or something like that, to see before your first page, because I like how sturdy. I like, for one thing, how when you glue the fabric down, it's just nice to get it easy and nice and smooth, and it makes this nice and sturdy. So I often like to do that first folio, either half fabric or whole fabric anyway. And then, I like to use them for spine covers and all that sort of thing. So I want to do some fabric today also. You can do vellum. I've done vellum, let's see, in some of the techniques. Let's see. I've done tracing paper, but, these, again, were bubble techniques. But this actually was done with vellum in the technique I'm going to show you today. And it just creates a really interesting paper. And again, I like to make vellum pockets. So maybe I'll pull a piece of vellum out today too and show you. This again was also done with the technique that I'm going to do today. And you can see where I cut that corner pocket out. And I don't have very much, so maybe I'll do a piece of vellum today also. And I'm just using this Strathmore. This is printable vellum, but I'll put a link down below for that. And let's see, what else do I want to show you? So I'm going to do a piece of vellum. I'm going to have to go get a piece of fabric because I don't think I have one cut. I'll have to do that. And then paper, and then let's see. So I'm going to also, maybe I want to show you, I'll show you maybe before I get to all the other items, some of the papers I did that we're going to try to do. And that way you can I can kind of point out some of the mistakes, or not mistakes really, but some of the reasons that I do something different. So one of the things that I'm going to do different than if you have watched my old videos for doing these kind of techniques is, one of the issues is depending on how you dry it. So that's one of the things to consider. I'm impatient, and so I tend to want to put them in the oven at like a low temperature, but I'll get distracted and then they are in there too long. If you do a stack at a time, like I'm going to show you one way to do it, you end up with your top piece and your bottom piece. The bottom piece obviously is on the metal pan, and then the top piece is mostly exposed to the air. So those two pieces get baked more than the ones in between. And depending on how many you have, you end up maybe baking it too long to get those middle ones drying. The two outer ones become crispy. So an example. So in this example, this one I know because I remember, you see how brown that is. It was the one that was against the metal. And then I don't remember which one was at the top, but I did this one by itself, and I ended up leaving it in too long. And it looks fine, but when you compare it to other things in real life, I recognize that this one got really crispy two ways, because it's very brown around the edges. I left it in, and it was actually baking. So it's just like baking food. You're going to brown it. Now, the products that I'm using are coffee and tea and that sort of thing anyway, so they're already brown. But that's one thing that happens. And obviously, the parts that were hitting the pan, those all were very brown. And you get this, when you bake it, you get this almost like a separation of the paper. You get bubbles. So I don't know if you can see that. I do have some other ones. I think it shows up more. But you can see where the paper actually kind of bubbles up. And so it's very textural. It might be good for some things, but this side's pretty flat to, journal on, write on, do whatever. But this is almost, it's an interesting paper, but I don't know if it's too textural for a background. I don't know. It just depends on what you want to use it for. For a collage paper, it could be really cool. So I'm going to save it and use it, but that's just something I want to point out that will happen if you bake your paper. And again, this one didn't bubble up. This one is with the 28-pound paper I can feel. The other one I think was a 32-pound paper. So it's thicker paper, and that hammer mill paper, the way it's made, it may be like 2 layers put together to get that 32-pound, and so you get those bubbles when you bake it. So the other thing that happens is when you fold it in half for a folio, it can crack like this, and then that's when you have to do the repair. So when they're this brittle, I try not to even use them for that. I will use them for collage or something else. That way, it doesn't need to be structural that way. But those are the 2 things that happen when you bake your paper. So the alternative is to let it air dry naturally, which is going to take a long time. And how I do that is, because I want them to dry flat, if you dry them hanging, you know, everything is just going to be running down and kind of mixing up more than maybe you want. So you really just want to dry them flat. So when I did this experiment, I did them where I stacked my papers, and then that was the oven method. I also tried doing the stack method and then pulling them all off in a stack and letting them dry on. What I do is I take my flooring in here is not carpet. It's actually rubber mat for like a gym, but I take garbage bags, big plastic garbage bags, and cut them open and then lay them out on the floor. And that way you can also kind of create some wrinkles in your plastic and then lay your paper on top. You'll get those wrinkles transferred from the bottom, and that gives you some of those like big slabs of stone look where there's, you know, the lines in them. So you can do that. You can stack them, pull the whole stack off. And then after they've dried a little bit, in that manner, then you can maybe take them apart and let them dry the rest of the way evenly. The reason that the stacking is kind of nice is that both sides of your paper have interest to them. And it's, you know, the one you have on the bottom, you're going to do your technique, and then you put another paper on top of it. And I'll show you that. Those are going to transfer to each other. And then you're adding a next one with a whole different technique. Well, all those different techniques and things you're doing, all the liquids and everything are going through. And so they're transferring to each other. They're going to look nothing like they look when you're doing it. So it doesn't really matter, but you get such interesting papers at the end. You can do a similar thing by doing them individually. And then I did a whole batch where I actually did them on the open, instead of doing it in this, I did them on the open trash bags. That also can work. I don't really like working down on the floor so much. So my next experiment was to do them in the tray, one at a time, and then very carefully take my tray over to the floor and take them off and just lay them down. And for me, just, you know, not having to get up and down off the floor, that kind of worked, and they're very similar in the end. So let's just get going with the other products that I'm going to be using, and then we'll do some fun stuff. So I have these just little plastic cups, and let me go back up. One of the first things I do is I mix up a spray bottle of, this is coffee water with instant coffee. It could be tea, whatever you want. It could be real coffee that, you know, you just make a cup of coffee and put in there, but this is cheaper. So I just get the cheapest brand of instant coffee because it dissolves. And then you can also use this as a technique that we're gonna use it 2 ways. So a spray bottle with tea or coffee, and then because I have coffee in that, I did a cup with made a cup of tea and put in this, make it as strong or weak as you want. These are just little pipettes, and you can use anything. You can use a straw. You know, you put your finger over the top and then you can put the liquid. So I'll use that and show you. But these are just a little squeeze thing. I'll put links to these. You buy them in like 100, you know, a ton in a package. So these are just handy to be able to drip and drop. You can use, I don't have one here, but you can use just like a foam paintbrush, little throwaway kind. That way when you dip it, it kind of soaks in like a sponge, and then you pull that out and you can splatter it around. So a paintbrush, anything that you're going to get the liquid onto your paper. So this one, I have another coffee mixture. It's still coffee, but it's not as strong as the other one. And then I have another coffee. This one's super strong, just so there are different colors. Now, I've been using these for the last few days, and I haven't been cleaning a paintbrush as I go back and forth. So this one actually may have lots of different stuff in it, but it's really dark. So I don't really care that things get intermixed because they're going to end up mixed on here anyway. It's just to get kind of some different interest. Then I also have in this little cup, I just have a tiny bit of Black India ink. And I'm going to use this, the papers that I was doing the last couple of days, I had this very diluted. So my drips and drops come out more gray in the end than black. If you want them more black, like those fossil looking pages I showed you, then you dilute it less. So today I have diluted it very little. My ink had actually dried on the bottom of the cup, so I just poured a little bit more and just spritzed it with a little bit of water just to make it easier to splatter. I'll probably dilute it more as I go, just so I can get some variation, but I'm starting out with a pretty dark. And then I have some magic here. This is just some lemon juice. You can use those concentrated lemons that you buy in the produce department, but they're plastic lemon, or lime. It's some kind of citrus. I'm using a real lemon, so I just squeezed it into here, and I didn't dilute it at all. You can, but I want it to do its magic. And the lemon juice and the ink will do that fossilized thing more, I believe, if you have the ink less diluted. Okay, so we're going to try that today. And then this one, so this one is Delusions ink spray in vibrant turquoise. I do have, when I bought those, it came in a pack of 3, so I may also use, this is periwinkle blue, and this is laid back lilac. I haven't tried this one. I did use some of this. Is more of a navy kind of blue, royal blue. We'll try those. So the ink sprays work well. Acrylic ink I've tried in the past, it doesn't work as well. And I've also have some distress oxides. Those work in a very different way. I think I have some, I end up wanting to dilute those a lot because they're a little, again, too opaque for what I want to do. I'm going to do some other papers where I'm going to use those things, I think, just to get some bolder papers. But for what I'm doing, I want them to look very earthy and natural and that sort of thing. So I do like this turquoise. It gives you those beachy colors. It mixes with all the coffees and teas and turns a really pretty greens, all kind of natural things. So I like that one, and I've diluted it a lot also. And then I like to use mica sprays. I know these are a lot of things, but you might not have all of them. So I'm just showing you the different ones that I'm using. But you can actually, this is a bottle that was an empty mica spray bottle. There's always a little bit left in it. So I actually added some of that watery turquoise into this. And this one was tarnished brass, so it made a really pretty metallic green color. So save your distressed bottles. There's always some left in there, even though you can't, get it out anymore. And mix it with your other things, and you end up with some really pretty concoctions. This one I'm going to use is tarnished brass. So these are just distressed mica sprays. And then these, I don't even know where I got these. These say they're from Tattered Angels. They came in a little set. Who knows? I've had them for years and years. And they are just different colors, again, of mica sprays. But these are really pretty. They give you this kind of, metallic-y look in there, but it mixes with all the liquid in such a way that when it dries, it makes those little cracks and things that you see in rocks in nature. So it's really pretty. And it, again, just kind of keeps that natural look. Then the other last ingredient, I promise, is salt. So this is just a regular salt, so the fine grain. And then I also have some of the coarse salt. Those give 2 different textures, so you want, 2 is good. Rock salt, if you have like for ice cream salt, when you're making homemade ice cream, it's bigger chunks. That I don't have any here, but that also works. It doesn't give you as much of the texture, but what happens is those liquids settle around those crystals and give you that nice shape. So let's see if I can find one in here. So this is the larger salt, and The finer salt you don't see as much, you just get a lot of little texture there, but the variation is because I use different, there's more of the regular salt here, but you feel it. It gives you kind of this scaly little texture to it. So it's just a lot of fun to add, you know, to your paper. And it just makes it much more interesting. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple where I stack them just to show you how to do that if you want to stack them. So I start just spritzing the whole thing because I don't really want any white. Now, if I miss any part of this, remember I showed you those white and yellow ones, it's because there was part of the paper did not have any liquid on it. And what would happen is if I were to just start with a piece and just rely on whatever liquid comes through and runs around underneath, that's how you get that white and then whatever color. So if you like that look and you want some white, like say you're going to use these and you want to doodle in those white voids and then have the other part, which would look really cool, or use the white part and then come back and use watercolor in that white part. So you might want some white parts. So if you do, then you would just lay this paper down like I just did and work on this side and not do anything on this side. And see what happens is just from laying it down, it did pick up some liquid, but I have a lot of white area. So if you want to use it in that way, that might be kind of neat, you know. So maybe I'll just leave this one and I'll only do one side. Normally what I would do is, now that I have this wet, I would just flip this over. And now this was all covered with coffee, so it's not going to be, I won't have white spaces. I will have spaces that are lighter or darker just from continuing work, but I won't have any of that bright white space. Okay, so then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start grabbing different things, and you can use this, like I said, and you know, this is going to be the lightest color because it's the tea, but you can drop it, you can, you know, do this, and you won't see a whole lot right now, but let me pull this tray up or pull this in a little bit. But you can see up close it is doing something, right? So it may not all show up on camera really well, and I know these things, let's see, maybe if I get those out of the way, you won't have that glare. So then maybe the next one I want to do is the next, you know, this one, and I maybe just drop some here or there. And again, it doesn't really, it's all going to kind of get blended together. You might make it look really neat like this and say you like how you see it. In order for it to even end up at all like that, you would probably have to just let it dry where it sits. And in a pan with a lot of liquid, it's going to take a long time. So that is why if I were to be doing this over on the floor, then I would get the most likeness of what I'm doing, if that makes sense. So I'll show you some papers at the end where I'm going to see if I can differentiate ones that I did that on the floor, and I think you'll be able to tell the difference that I mean. So then I'm going to take maybe this darker one, and maybe instead of the pipette, I just want to do this and get some splatters. And you can do as much or as little as you want. Okay, no wrong or right here. And then some of them maybe you want black and some of them maybe you don't, but I'm just going to show you in this one a little of everything so that I can see if we can get some of the magic to happen. So I'm going to just spray some of that, and you can already see how you get this kind of, they're bleeding into each other kind of like watercolor would do. Okay, and then let's grab the blue and see if we can get some of that really pretty green to come out. And you just see how it just, they kind of avoid each other. When you have the ink that is not diluted, it reacts to all these other things. Oh, I forgot the other magic thing that I included, my other ingredient. Into each one of those cups, I put a few drops of glycerin. Now, I did not do this in any of the previous papers that went into those journals because I didn't think of it then. But my goal was to soften so that I didn't get the brittleness of the paper if I baked it. And also this acidic, all this acidic things that I'm introducing, I thought if I add something that's going to maybe moisturize the paper, it will stay pliable So that was my thought. I think it worked in some of them. The ones I over baked, it didn't, but all my other papers seem to be pretty good. And I have another tip at the end that I'll show you that I think is another key to making your folds not break. Okay, so you see what this is doing. It's looking really cool. So, and I do have some kind of white spaces where I didn't get a lot of coffee. I think I would leave those in this one just because I think they're going to end up soaking anyway. But this is going to be the fun thing. So then when you take some lemon, watch what happens if you spatter on that ink. Let's see if it's going to work here. It almost is like a kind of a resist thing. It kind of breaks it up. Let me see if I can pull this up and let you see. So you see some graininess there. It kind of does that. And it can give you that kind of fossilized look. Now, this one didn't seem to do too much of that, but the next step here with some salt, I'm going to kind of aim for those dark spots because I want to kind of have some texture in there and break that up. And then the next one you can use, and you don't have to use, like I said, all of these in one thing, but we're just going to see what happens. So I'm kind of aiming in this one for the brown, more brown, spots that I didn't hit the large ones. And we'll see how that turns out. So that looks like it's going to be a beautiful piece of paper. So now the trick is, if I wanted it to look like this as much as possible, I would need it to be drying like this. And I can't use this pan. If I start to pick it up at all, this doesn't have too much liquid in it because this is my first piece of paper. So what I could do is try to dry it a little bit with my heat gun before I take it off, and then maybe I can transfer it to my drying space without it getting too messed up. So I'm gonna do this a couple of times with the heat gun because when you have more liquid, the experiment, you'll see that it can do some different things. So I'm not gonna make you listen to this. I'm gonna mute the audio here, but I'm just gonna dry it a little bit before I take this off. Okay, I didn't dry that very much, and you can see how when I go to remove this, it's going to run and different things. But that's just kind of part of the charm, okay? So I'm going to go, usually I would just take the tray and go over there, but I'm just going to carry this over to one of my drying things, and I'm actually going to let it run a little bit just for interest. And then hopefully we'll like how this one turns out. Okay, so now I have some liquid in my pan here. And I think this one I'll do where I wet both sides. Just to see if we can see a difference. So that way that side won't be white. It'll have something on it. And I think also I'm gonna stack a couple on this one. So I just want to get the whole thing wet, partly because I don't like to really have a lot of white space, and it helps the paper to stick to my tray. So again, and I can do these any order. I don't have to do them all. So let's just say I do a little of that. A little of this. A little of that. Maybe do some black. Now, the black, if you get a spot that you don't like how much, it's too much of a blob, then you can use some liquid. I can add some of this, and it's going to kind of change it a little bit here. Squirt some more, introduce some more liquid to it. But that kind of just has a really neat, interesting look. And then this I can actually, let's see, let me grab a different. I'll grab my lemon one. And this is the lemon. Oh, it has some lemon on it because I pulled it out of there. But this is the blue one. Sometimes I see these and it's like, oh, it's a shame that won't hold that there because it's really pretty. And then let's maybe do some more lemon. And I'm putting a lot of liquid on this because I want to do the dryer thing again and show you what can happen here. And then maybe some of my salt. This is why you need that sponge that I showed you at the beginning, because after these dry, you're going to have all this crusty salt on there that you need to sort of sand off before you iron these papers. Okay, and that is like a lot of black and white marbly looking. If you get, like I said, to a part and you want it to be maybe not so dark, it's going to blend everything more, but you can kind of tone it down a little bit. And then maybe I didn't like what I just did, so I can try to break that up again. So you just kind of play around with it. And see what you get. So it's just kind of a big mess. Now I didn't spray, I haven't done any of my mica, so let's see. Maybe I'll do some sparkly. And you can't really see where it goes, but trust me, at the end when this is all dried, you'll see it. So you can see where it's settling into these cracks, and that gives you that kind of stone look too. So the other thing you can do, and I won't talk during this, is you can use your heat gun and kind of move things around. Okay, so all that ends up, you know, it's kind of mixing it together, but it gives you that really natural stone look when it's dried. Okay, so now what I can do is I can just put another piece of paper on top of this, and it's really going to mute this a lot, and it's going to end up being, you know, some of those papers were really light, but you can see all that shape and texture in them. It's because you're putting another, you're going to dilute this by adding another layer. And I don't even have to spray this. I could if I want, you know, say I spray this side and then flip it over again. But see, you're getting it to transfer. And the longer it sits there, the more of that it's going to soak up. So I'm just going to do one and not even flip it. I'm going to leave it like that and then spray this side. And because I stack this right on top of the other one, I won't get any edge border. You see a little bit of it there. What happens is if you don't put your, if your papers were not right on top of each other, where they overlap, you would end up with that shape, you know, that line there. So we're going to just do the same thing, add some things. And using all these different ones, even if say I only use 3 of them, I don't use all of them. Like say the next one, I'm not even going to put any of that black on there. Then it makes them all cohesive still because I'm using, you know, 3 or more of the things. So maybe I use the, let's see, some mica spray on this one. And now you can see that more because I have a lot less color going on. Then you maybe even want to use one of these random ones that I haven't tried this purple. Lilac. I haven't done this, oops. I haven't done this at all. And that doesn't look like really a color in nature. But to kind of get it to be more cohesive, then I would just maybe add some more of my other natural things and see if I can get that purpleness to tone down and become more of a gray kind of thing. Maybe I spray some more of this. So like I said, there's not like a right or a wrong. It's just playing around. And then let's see. There's some pinks where that lilac, it kind of spreads around. And then maybe some lemon juice. To get some of that fossilized look. Okay, And then maybe one more sheet. And I think when I take these off, I'm going to go lay them over on top just like they are. I'm going to leave them stacked for a while and see what happens. Oh, my spray bottle isn't working. So you see how dark those are now, and we're going to see how light they are when we're finished. So this one I'm going to do a little bit different. I'll do some of these darker ones. And then I'm going to take, I want some of this again, or maybe I use a different color. We'll use this more gold one. And then I'm going to take some of this coffee, this instant coffee. And that instant coffee, then it's going to dissolve because it's introduced to this moisture. So you're going to get where it kind of spreads out. And if you want to dilute it more, you know, if you don't want it so chunky, it's going to dissolve. So I'm going to leave that because you're going to be surprised at the end. It's not going to be that much. You could, you know, spritz it and get it wet again, but there's a lot of liquid going on here already. So let's see what happens if I do some of this and break it up. And maybe some tea. And I'm going to try leaving that and not maybe getting it too moved. When I take it off of this tray and move it, it's going to end up getting, you know, moved around there. So let me put some salt on it maybe. And I'm not going to do any black on this one. We're going to see if we get any transfer from on the other side from the previous one. So I'm going to take this whole tray over and put this one off. Okay, and I was able to get that off without moving it too much. I don't know if you can see this, but all of that metallic is now in this pan. So I'm just going to kind of move it around and put, let's do this piece of vellum. And see how grungy we can get this. And then I need to find a piece of fabric because I want to do a piece of fabric. So I'm going to leave that without flipping it over. You can see how much of it's covered already. And wet this side because it's going to kind of want to start curling. And then let's see, what are we going to put on this one? You can see vellum and tracing paper does the same thing. It starts to really wrinkle up as it's wet. But it's getting all these little vein looking tree branch things. It's just a fun thing to play with. You just never know what you're going to get. And then the tea bag paper, I'll put a link for that. It's really big sheets. I think they're 24 by 24 inch square sheets. And it's, let me see if I have a piece here. This is already dyed, but you can kind of see how, I don't know if you can see this. It kind of has a stripy effect to it. And that's in the paper. But it's a nice weight. It ends up being kind of a fun paper, similar to rice paper, a thickness and all of that. And it has a smooth side and a rough side like rice paper. So it's really great for collage too. But this I really liked for my repairs. And you can see this one was a scrap that I had painted on, so I used it. But you can do it when you do one of these. And then that way, layer it into your layers. And then you have this for repair. And you know, it kind of then coordinates with all of your pages. So you can see how it's really wrinkling up. And it's so neat when it dries. It dries in a really interesting texture. So it's pretty clumpy, so I can just, you know, wet it more and get it to move. If I don't want it to look like that, you know, you can kind of let it get into all those cracks. You could try to kind of smooth it out more. But oops, no, I tore it. But it really wants to have these. So it just gives you that really neat tree branch kind of look. So I kind of like that. So I'm just going to add some more splatters here. And again, this is going to get all messed up when I go to take it off, but it's just going to kind of blend all those colors. Let's see about some metallic here. And I do kind of want more of this to give me some of that green color. See if I can get it off of here without it mixing too much. And then let's see what happens with the... And where a lot of the texture comes from is when I add the salt to this. It really, it kind of reacts in an interesting way on the vellum. Okay, maybe a little bit of this one. Now this is going to take a long time to dry because there's so much liquid in that. So I'm going to see if I can just kind of pour some of that off, or it's going to take forever to dry. But see, it may end up coming out very gray. So I'm going to go pull this one off. Now I'm going to see if I can find a piece of fabric. Okay, this is, I think this feels like a poly cotton blend. It may be cotton, but I'm just going to try and see what happens to do a piece of fabric. The other thing I need to do is I need to make some more rusted fabric. So maybe that's another video to come. I have a video already. I should go back and watch it and see if I can come up with something different. But I'm getting low on my fabric stash. Some of that, maybe some of this. Okay, we're going to see if we end up with a super grungy piece of fabric that I will hopefully love. So, oh, maybe some coffee. Okay, we're going to call that good, and we're going to see what we end up with. So I'm going to, if you've hung in this long and want to see some of the papers that I made in the last couple of days, I'm going to move this and I'll show you some papers. Okay, so I have several different ones. This is made with rice paper, and let me maybe scooch out a little bit. I did these with rice paper the same way. You can kind of see, I don't know if you can see, but where all of these shapes are metallic and the salt kind of settled in there. So it has a little bit of a shimmer. And then this is the reverse side. So those are fun. This one, you can see my black splatters. All those splatters were the black, but they were more diluted, so they came out more gray. This one, you can see where when you have your papers not stacked right on top of each other, you'll get that line. But this one has, I don't know if you can see that shimmer, it has some metallic in it and a lot more splatters. And then that one. So those will be fun. Those I can use for repair also. I did these just to see how they would look for collage. So I did some rice paper. This is my pile. Let's see. This is my cracking example. This one has a lot of metallic on it. And I think I'll do this one with my other little tip here. Maybe these couple. This one has a lot of that where you baked it, and it had a lot of that texture. These were done, now that I see that these are pulled out, these I believe were done directly onto the garbage bags. I didn't do them in the tray. And these I haven't folded. Oh, this one has a lot of that salty texture. I think these were also done on the garbage bag. They held a lot of their pattern. This one has a lot of that texture. So even the ones I just did, they're going to be similar to this kind of thing because I used all the same materials, with the exception of the black ink. The black ink on those may be more intense because I didn't dilute it as much. This one you can really see a lot of the texture. And you can feel that. So it's really kind of interesting papers. So these I've already folded. And that was going to be my other tip because I can already see one in here. And this may have been one of my previous papers. It is. Okay, this is from the batch a year ago, probably months ago, whenever, that I made those two journals. This came out of those. And when you bake them, and I did not use the glycerin, then they are, they're very brittle. So you have to repair that or use it for collage or something like that. These, I think, were all in my first group because they're all lighter. And I've already, actually this one wasn't, this was bubble paper that I did just with tea or coffee and bubbles. So that was, some of these I had previously done. These were in this grouping. And these I tried to fold, and I do have a little bit of cracking, but not bad. So I'll probably repair that. But I just like how these were all really kind of lighter ones, subtle. These you could, because they're maybe less interesting on one side and have more on the other side, you could actually use these to copy on and do a digital, maybe some text or something on one side would be really pretty, or a vintage document. I could even still do that even though these are folded and run through my printer. This one has a lot of the metallic sheen on it. You can see the wrinkles from laying it. Can you see those wrinkles from laying it on the thing. So these are all pretty subtle, plain ones that I could print on one side if I wanted to. This one's a little more, has a little more going on. But I just like how, you know, they're kind of neutral, great for journaling. They're not plain white. You know me, I'm not a fan of plain white. So all pretty subtle in these. This has a lot of those wrinkles. And in the wrinkles, it's just really pretty. A lot of that extra metallic will settle in there. This is one that I can tell got baked. It's tearing, but it also has the bubbles. This was with the 32-pound hammer mill paper. So this was before I discovered my next tip for you. This one is after. I really like that one though. I don't think the colors are showing up as well on camera. There's like, when I use that blue, there's a lot of that blue-green color in here, just real pale. So those were all really pretty subtle ones. Then I had the idea, some of these are more busy. These were ones I did, okay, there's a whole batch here. I don't know if all of these will be, so I'll try to see. I think these were done just with the techniques I just showed you. Oh, no, they were done on stenciled ones. Okay, so one of the things that I did yesterday is I had this pile of folios that I had made with just really boring tea-stained paper, nothing exciting about them at all. Some of them were bubble ones gone wrong, like this was just a piece of printer paper. You can kind of see a little bit of bubble effect, but not much. Some of them had quite a bit, but some of them just, these to me are just really bad. This, it has a lot of color, but it's just kind of ho-hum. And they're just with the light, like probably 20-pound copy paper, so they're not even very thick. And then some I had actually used some stencils like this, but then they still came out kind of boring and subtle to me. This is another one, but I've added to it. So you can see in the background, I think that I had a kind of a weave stencil. So I grabbed these papers and I just started doing this technique that I just showed you on top of what I already had, just so I can get them more grungy as like another layer. And so I like how they turned out now. They're thicker. They have some of that texture, just more going on. So I may even go back some of these that are pretty plain and do another layer. So there's nothing to say that you can't add to them the ones that you didn't like. So this one was also a stencil, and you can barely see the stencil through there. It just didn't turn out very well. So I just went over it with more layers. So this would have been one of those, you know, thin blue ones that I didn't like. And the more you do to it, I think it just thickens up the paper too. So just kind of made it more interesting. I think this is one where I think I added this color, you know, just to see what adding a little more color would do and how much I might need to break it up. Actually, this one might have been one of the oxides I tried. But I really like all the wrinkles in the back that you see. You can kind of see where this was a bubble paper here. So I just kind of took papers that I didn't really like. This one was another one of the stenciled ones. And it's not that I don't like the stencil, it wasn't enough. I wanted more to be going on. So this one I made pretty dark. All of these I did, I believe, and put them right to dry in a single layer. This one turned out really pretty, and this was a bubble one that actually did turn out pretty good. It was pretty even, and it was really kind of that cobblestone gray kind of looking, but I think it made it even better by adding these other layers to it. So it just gave it kind of more interest and color. So, you know, I saved the papers I don't like. This was a bubble paper that I didn't really, it didn't have much going on, and just added to it. So they're just some interesting ones. So now I have, I don't know how many are here. And like I said, I may need to make some of those. Ooh, I like this one. Some of those a little bit more interesting. This one again was one of the bubble ones that wasn't too bad, but it's even better now. And so I think I'm probably close to having enough to do another journal. And it'll all be obviously, you know, more neutrals. Like I said, maybe I'll take some of these really boring ones and spice them up a bit. But I have enough to do another one, and I have some ideas for, this one was one of those really textural ones that had a little damage there. So this for a smaller journal where I have to cut it down a little bit would be okay. But I think I have enough to do. Oh, this was another one with a stencil that wasn't very great, and now it's better. So I think I'll put these together. Maybe I need to do some more to some or not. I have those few other ones that I can do. But my other little tip is, and I should have known this, I should have thought of this before, but if you, any paper, let me grab this one. This one's not going to be brittle. That's really pretty though. I think I want to scan that before I fold it. So maybe I don't want to fold those, the ones that I want to scan. Maybe I'll show you on this one, because I don't think I'll scan this one. One of the things that happens also when you try to push dry it, force dry it, one of the things that I have a habit of doing is it will be a little damp, almost dry, and I'll want to go finish drying it with my iron. And it doesn't like that so much because maybe the center was more wet and the edges were starting to dry. When I go to iron it, it will create this little creases, and it doesn't want to go totally flat. I have this whole section in here that kind of dried different. And so that's just something to be aware of. I don't know that I mind it so much. It just adds some interest to it. But that's what happens when you try to force dry it. You're better off if you can just let it dry naturally and be patient. So I'm trying to work on my patience. But the thing that I found helps is if you score it instead of fold it. Use a scoreboard if you have one. There's ways to score things without, you know, like using a bold folder against a ruler and that sort of thing. But if you have a scoreboard, this is a Recollections one. It has the cutter and the scorer tool. So I know this is 11 inches, so I'm just going to go here to 5.5. And I know my score is a little bit off, so I'm going to offset it just a tiny bit. And just score it. Uh-oh, I just did it too hard. If you do that, then it will fold nicely without breaking. And this one, I pushed too hard right there, and I cut it because I pushed too hard. But if you score it, it'll fold without cracking the paper. So let me see if I have another one I can do that. This is another nice one though that I might want to scan first. No, I'll not. So I've been scanning these, the ones I like, as I go, so that I can do another kit for those of you who don't want to make these papers, but you like them. And I have one Grungy digital kit, so I'm just doing this a little not so hard. Oh, I didn't do it on the right line. Sorry. So that I can do another Grungy digital kit. I have lots of papers now to choose from. So I'll hopefully be putting a kit together soon. But that way, that folded so much better and it didn't crack. So lesson learned, score your folds before you fold them instead of just folding the paper. So that is it. I'm going to let those dry and come back to you in another video and show you what they look like, because I have another idea for binding a journal together in a different way that I have never tried. So I may do a little practice on something and then bring it to you, another 1 or 2 tutorials for that. So that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Click on subscribe if you haven't already, and the little bell will let you know when I post another video. So have a great rest of your day. Now go make something. Bye.